We're going to get on into the lesson tonight. Tonight we're going to do a topical lesson. So when you do a topical lesson, it's about there are different scriptures involved. So we'll be surfing through some scriptures in the book of Proverbs. The topical study is going to be in the book of Proverbs. So we'll be surfing through some chapters in Proverbs. The book of Proverbs we're going to be dealing with, and our focus will start in Proverbs chapter 11. The book of Proverbs is all about wisdom. Wisdom is not about knowing facts. Wisdom is not about knowing facts. Wisdom is about knowing what to do with what you know. Wisdom is knowing when to do it. Wisdom is knowing how to do it. So wisdom is not about knowing facts. It's about knowing what to do with what you know, when to do it, and how to do it. So we're now crossing into a new section of the book of Proverbs. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs were small, mini lectures that Solomon gave to his son. The rest of the book are what we typically call Proverbs. Proverbs are sayings, typically short, that give wisdom and insight to everyday living. Wisdom and insight to everyday living. So Proverbs is intended to lead to a better life. A better life. In other words, Proverbs will give us power for living. It's intended to lead to a better life. They are not absolute promises that if you do these things, you will always be healthy, wealthy, and things will always go your way. They are general principles. We live by principles, standards, precepts. They are general principles that if you do them, your life will generally be better than if you didn't do them. Be better than if you didn't do them. So I want to encourage you to have a pencil or a pen ready as we work through each topic. I'm not going to take time to stop and unpack every single proverb, or we'll be in Proverbs for the next 5 years. God may want to use one of the proverbs that we simply pass over to speak to you. So be ready to mark up your Bible or write down a verse. Proverbs is Hebrew poetry. Hebrew poetry. And most of these proverbs are in 2 lines. One line plays off of another. Sometimes the second line is parallel of the first. It expresses the same idea with different words. Sometimes the second line is an opposite idea, still clarifying the second, but by way of contrast. There's a lot of contrast in Proverbs. So be careful that you don't look at one phrase without looking at the other. Send your way half informed if you don't read both phrases of the verse. So tonight we want to talk about something we don't like to talk about. Tonight, we want to talk about God's advice about money. God's advice about money. And don't look at me as telling you about your money. Look at Solomon. Look at Solomon, because I know we as a people don't like nobody telling us what to do with our money. So look at Solomon, and you can't say nothing to Solomon. He's dead. He's dead. He's alive, but you can't get in touch with him. You can't get in touch with him. So God's advice about money, and we use the base of Proverbs 11 and 24 through 26. Now, Proverbs gives us practical instructions on the use of money, although sometimes it is advice we would rather not hear. It's more comfortable to continue in our habits than to learn how to use money wisely. So here is some wisdom for the use of money. Now remember, Proverbs is intended to lead to a better life. Lead to a better life. So Proverbs teaching on money is intended to help us to have more of it, to do the right thing with it. So the first advice or wisdom in the use of money is be generous in giving. Be generous in giving. Solomon says this in verses 11, chapter 11, verses 24 through 26. Chapter 11, verse 24 through 26. And I'm using tonight the English Standard Version because it makes it real plain, the English Standard Version. Verse 24 said, one gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. Verse 25, whoever brings blessings will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. Verse 26, the people curse him who holds back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. Now, Proverbs 22:9 says this, whoever is bountiful, or whoever has a bountiful eye, will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. He shares his bread with the poor, there is one who scatters his substance, his resources, his money. He scattered it in abundance, in a plenty, and luxury. That man or woman who scatters like that diminishes their substance. Their substance is diminished until it comes to nothing. But those who distribute by giving to the poor or for the service of their faith shall increase their wealth. This is Solomon principles shall increase their wealth. The poor who pour out prayers for those distressed people whom they have no money to relieve, are liberal in the sight of God. Now that's simply talking about people who don't have any money, people who are poor themselves and have a desire to help others. They have a desire to help others, but they don't have any money to give them, so they give them the next best thing. They pour out prayers for those distressed people whom they have no money to relieve. And they are liberal in the sight of God. They didn't have any money, but they got down on their knees and they prayed. They laid in their bed or they drove in their car and they prayed for those people that are distressed. For if there is a willing mind, now that's what the Bible says, if there is a willing mind, it is acceptable according to what a man has. God knows what all of us got because he gave it to us or he withheld it from us. So if you have a willing mind, it is accepted according to what a man has and not according to what he has not. God delights in cheerful giving, and he will not fail to reimburse it in its different expressions. God has different ways of blessing us. So he has a way of reimbursing it in expressions of giving, in expressions of lending, or in expressions of selling. Next point, place people needs ahead of profit. I think I was talking to one of my ministry leaders not long ago, and I told him, don't make it about money. Don't make it about money. Don't put money ahead of the ministry. You know, put the ministry ahead. And people who give will give the money. But don't make it about money. Don't make it about money. Place people's needs ahead of profit. Proverbs 11:26. The people curse him who holds back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. They curse him who holds it back, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it. What you give, you gain. What you hold, you lose. A blessing is on the head of him who sells it. And in other words, we are going through this right now. Anybody tried to buy any meat lately? We're going through this right now. He must not, the Bible talks about people curse him who holds back grain. He must not withhold his grain from the market in order to increase the price. That happens to us frequently, especially with gas prices. Gas prices, they run it up when they want them. They withhold it and raise the price of a barrel, and they run it up when they want to. So Solomon is saying that you must not do that. Keep it from the market in order to increase the price and enrich yourself at the expense of the poor and risk their life and health. We'll come back to that after the lesson. We're gonna come back because we got a question about that one. The next point is be cautious of co-signing for another. Now I got burnt, and it wasn't my brother's intention to burn me. He didn't intentionally do that. He got in some trouble, and he got locked up. But I had my name on his car. He got in trouble and got locked up. He didn't intentionally do that. He didn't mean to do that. But I got caught. I got caught. So Solomon say, be cautious of co-signing for another. In Proverbs 17, now these are wisdom. This is wisdom for the use of money. Wisdom for the use of money. So Proverbs 17 and 18 says, one who lacks sense. Solomon said that. I didn't say it. I didn't call you that. He said, one who lacks sense gives a pledge and puts up security in the presence of his neighbor. Now, Solomon had a lot to say about this throughout Proverbs. So in chapter 22 and verse 26 and 27, he says, be not one of those who give pledges. Be careful what you sign on to. Do not be one of those who give pledges. Be careful how you make a vow. Be not one of those who make pledges, who put up security for debts. If you have nothing which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? For folks will come and take everything that's of value because of a debt. So Solomon warns us often against carelessly taking responsibility for another's performance or taking responsibility for somebody else's debt. This is what Solomon is talking about. If we would listen to Solomon, he would teach us to be richer and happier, as well as better believers. Let us at least consider one thing. Let us consider one thing, my brothers and my sisters. Suppose the principal borrower should prove unable to pay the creditor. In my case, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. He was unable to pay. You ain't working and you ain't got no money locked up. So he was unable to pay the credit. Will we be cheerfully? And that's my brother, and I love him. I know my sister on the line. I better make that clear. That's my brother, and I love him. Yeah. He did. Something happened. He couldn't help it. So borrowers should prove. If the borrower should prove unable to pay the creditor, will we be cheerfully? This is something you need to consider. Think about it. Will we be cheerfully willing to take his place? I wasn't cheerfully willing to take his place, but I had to. I had to. Ain't nothing was cheerful about it. I had to. Yeah. Or are we sure that we will be able, if called upon, to pay his debt? We are able at the present, but we know not whether we will be able or poor at the day of payment. We might have a little money right now, but when it comes time to pay off, we don't know whether we'll be able or be poor. So think about it. Think about it. And I'm saying a lot of this is left up to your discretion. You know, I'll help them get a down payment. I'll help my kids. I'll help them. I'll cheerfully help them get a down payment. But that's far as I'm going.
As far as I'm gonna go.
That's far as I'm going. I done got burnt, and I felt fire. Fire burns. Mm-hmm. And I got burned. So I'm willing to help them get a down payment, but that's as far as I'm going. As far as I'm going. Wisdom in the use of money, Solomon says, don't accept bribes. Don't accept bribes. In Solomon, in Proverbs 17 and 23, says the wicked accepts a bribe in secret to pervert the ways of justice. The ways of justice. Wicked men take their bribes in secret that they may do it without public observation. Can any man do a thing so secretly that God does not see it? That God does not see it. I think I need to come back and revisit this too after the lesson. Using wisdom with your money, Solomon says, help the poor. Help the poor. Help the poor. Whoever is generous to the poor, Proverbs 19 and 17. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. God will reimburse him. Whoever lends to the poor. Now he didn't say to the lazy, but he said to the poor. He didn't say to the careless and people who live like a prodigal, but he says to the poor. God will reimburse you for your deed. In Proverbs 21 and 13, he says, whoever closes his ear to the cry of the poor will himself call out and not be answered. Those who close their ears to the poor, they're gonna cry out. Look, what you reap is what you sow is what you reap. They're gonna cry out and not be answered. So here's the gist of this, of these verses. People refuse to give when they do not expect to receive, and they expect no return from the poor. You ain't gonna get nothing back from the poor. So people refuse to give when they do not expect to receive. Now, can we lose anything by lending it to the Lord? Can we lose anything by lending it to the Lord? The Lord is not a man that he should tell a lie. If he made a promise, he's gonna keep his promise. So if you're lending it to the poor, don't look to them to give it back. God's gonna revert. God will reimburse you. God will reimburse you. God will reimburse you. Those that lendeth to the poor lends to the Lord. Lends to the Lord. So we no longer have Jesus with us, but the poor we will have always with us. And when we have them to receive the fruits of our generosity, it is the same thing as if we had done it to Christ himself. Remember, Christ said, when you've done it to the least of them, you've done it to me. You've done it unto me. You've done it unto me. God will be sure to repay you what is given to the poor at his command. At his command. If I'm dealing with a poor situation And God drops in my spirit this text. If he drops it, those who lend to the poor, lend to the Lord, and I'll repay you back. Then I've got a clear answer as to what I should do. God will be sure to repay us what is given to the poor at his command with great increase. That's what I like about God. God don't give it back to you just like you gave it to them. God takes that and shake it together and give you more. Mm-hmm. Give you more. When we have reason to complain and we cry and shout, but God shuts out our prayer, when you're complaining about your situation and you crying and you shouting and God shut your prayer off, when that happens, consider your ways. Consider your ways. When your prayers are not answered like that, consider your ways. Perhaps you shut your ear on some occasion against the cry of some poor person. Mm-hmm. Perhaps that's the reason that your prayer is being shut out. Your prayer is being shut out. Solomon says, if you want to use wisdom with your money, store up for the future. Just mute your mic. Just mute your mic. Store up for the future. Just mute all mics, Johnny, and then we'll open them up after I get through. Store up for the future. If you're going to use wisdom in your stewardship, or wisdom in your wealth, or wisdom in your finances, Solomon says, store up for the future. So chapter 21 and verse 20, Solomon says, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling. But a foolish man devours it. That's what Solomon says. So here's what we're saying. We must give alms. The Bible says that we must give alms of all that we possess. But we are not called to give all that we possess in alms. Let me say that again. We must give alms of all that we possess. But we are not called to give all that we possess in alms. You don't give it all the way to the poor. That would be a drain on the fountain of benevolence. That would be a drain on our benevolence and prevent us from doing good as we see occasion. Though it would cause us, prevent us, if we gave it all away, it will prevent us from doing good as we see occasion of need. Though through the remaining parts of our life, if we give it all away, then we're prevented from doing good for the rest of our lives. We give it all away. We give it all away. Wisdom says, Solomon directs us to be liberal in charitable distributions. And yet he tells us that the wise have a desirable treasure, not only of necessities, but likewise of the comforts and the conveniences of life. When you use wisdom with what God has blessed you with, not only do you have the comfort of the necessities, everybody need a roof over their head and everybody need food on the table and clothes on their back, all those are necessities. But when you use wisdom in what God has blessed you with, then not only will you have the necessities, but you will have the comforts and the conveniences of life. Contrast. But a foolish man spends, man or woman, spends and destroys the resources of his family. Spends and destroys the resources of his family. His wealth is consumed by idleness or extravagance, or by the assaulting curse of God. That's something we need to pay more attention to. Our money can be cursed by God. If we're not doing right with what God gives us, if we're not good stewards over what God has blessed us with, our money can be cursed by God. So store up for the future. That's wisdom. Wisdom also says, when it comes to our finances, be careful about borrowing. Be careful about borrowing. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor. That's a very familiar story. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. The borrower is the slave of the lender. Let's shine some more light on that. Some people don't care how much they borrow. Some people don't care how much they borrow, never remembering that the day of payment is coming, and that a man or woman has as many masters as they have creditors. Your creditor is your master. Have many masters as they have creditors. This proverb is a warning to men and women to be hardworking and not wasteful. Men and women to be hardworking and not wasteful. You know, I ain't saying nothing to no. That they may not lose their independence. That they might not lose their independence. This is a warning. Be hardworking and not wasteful, that you may not lose your independence. Now, I'm just talking about what I'm talking about. One time, we used to cook. Seems like nobody cooked anymore. You go to the restaurant. And maybe they could afford it. You know, now I'm saying maybe they have used wisdom and they got it like that. But I see young people coming in the restaurant, sometimes they have 4 children. And they all order and they eat good. But I'm just saying that that's probably a sack of grocery for the week. But I mean, if you can afford it, no harm done. No harm done. These are some of the things that Solomon is talking about. Being careful about how we use what God has blessed us with. Being careful about your stewardship. And remember, whatever you got, you just a steward over it. And when God gets ready, you're going to leave it right here. Right here. So be wise while you're here. And try to live the best life while you're here. Be wise and try to live the best life while you're here. Be concerned about how you use what God has blessed you with. And Solomon has just laid out here for us some great advice. Some great advice on using what God has blessed us with.